have been sitting on this for a long time, longer than most people would consider reasonable. Years, really. Not because I didn't know something was wrong, and not because I was afraid of what I might find if I looked closer. It was because I understood, very early on, that once you act, you give up leverage. Once you speak, you narrow your options. Silence, on the other hand, leaves everything open. I am in my late 50s now. At the time this started, I was in my late 40s. I had already lived long enough to know that dramatic confrontations rarely produce useful outcomes. They feel decisive, but they usually just rearrange the damage. I had been married before. I had raised children. I had handled layoffs, lawsuits, and one extended family estate dispute that taught me more about human nature than any book ever could. By the time I met her, I was not naive. I was cautious, observant, and very aware of how quickly comfort turns into entitlement. We lived together for nearly 11 years. From the outside, it looked stable. A house in a quiet suburb, no kids at home, 2 cars in the driveway, regular routines. We were not flashy people. We didn't travel much. We didn't entertain often. We were the kind of couple neighbors forget to ask about because nothing ever seems to change. Inside the house, everything ran on patterns. I like patterns. I like predictability. I wake up early, coffee at the same time every morning, news on low volume, same chair at the table. She woke up later, usually after I'd already left for work, but on weekends the pattern was clear enough. She drank tea, not coffee. She liked the window open even in winter. She left cabinet doors open and never fully closed the dishwasher. These things annoyed me, but not enough to mention. Mentioning small things creates a habit of mentioning larger ones. I avoided that. We split household responsibilities in an unspoken way. I handled the big expenses: mortgage, insurance, utilities, taxes. She handled groceries, incidental purchases, occasional home decor changes. We both worked, but I made significantly more. That was understood without ever being discussed. Our finances were technically joint, but functionally tiered. The main account was mine in practice, even though both our names were on it. Her personal account existed mostly for convenience. Money is where I first noticed the drift. Not a big thing. Not something you point to and say, "Uh-huh." Just small irregularities. Cash withdrawals that didn't align with grocery runs. Online transfers that didn't correspond to any household expense. A credit card balance that stayed oddly consistent no matter how often she said she'd paid it down. I noticed, but I didn't ask. People assume silence equals ignorance. That is not true. Silence is often a form of inventory taking. I wanted to see if the pattern stabilized, worsened, or corrected itself. People who are simply disorganized eventually fix themselves. People who are hiding something usually get sloppier over time. At the same time, her behavior shifted in ways that were easy to dismiss individually. Phone face down on the table, taking calls in the other room, a new passcode after years of not bothering, staying up later at night scrolling, smiling faintly at nothing in particular, leaving the house for errands that took longer than they used to. None of this proves anything. It never does. The mistake people make is believing proof comes first and suspicion comes later. In reality, suspicion comes early. Proof arrives only if you wait long enough. I waited. The house itself became a kind of measuring instrument. Drawers told me things. Laundry patterns told me things. Trash told me things. I learned over time that if you pay attention, people reveal themselves in what they assume no one notices. She started buying clothes that never appeared in the regular rotation. Things that didn't show up in the hamper. Underwear I never saw again after the first wash. A jacket that lived in the trunk of her car rather than the closet. Shoes with no corresponding wear on our floors. I did not ask where she wore them. I tested boundaries without announcing that I was testing anything. I delayed reimbursements. I moved money between accounts quietly and watched whether she noticed. I left the house unexpectedly during times when she assumed I would be gone. I came home early without explanation. Each time I observed. I did not react. What I learned was not dramatic. It was procedural. She adjusted quickly. She compensated. She asked indirect questions about money without ever naming numbers. She became more careful with her phone, but not more secretive. She assumed I was inattentive, not suspicious. That assumption worked in my favor. People talk too much when they are confronted. When they are not, they relax. We did not fight. That is important to understand. There were no raised voices, no slammed doors, no tearful arguments at midnight. From the outside, and even from the inside if you didn't know what to look for, we were fine. That calm is what allowed everything else to continue. The first time I considered acting was about 3 years in. I found a receipt in her car for a hotel less than 10 miles from our house. Midday, 2 hours, paid in cash. I remember holding it for a long time, longer than necessary, and then putting it back exactly where I found it. I told myself there were explanations. There always are. But I also told myself something else. If this was nothing, it would repeat in a benign way. If it was something, it would escalate. I chose to wait. Over the years, I adjusted my own behavior subtly. I stopped depositing my full paycheck into the joint account. I redirected bonuses into a separate account she did not know existed. I paid off the mortgage early, without telling her how much extra I was putting toward principal. I documented everything, quietly, methodically. She never asked for details. She never wanted numbers. That told me more than any argument would have. Our routines continued. Dinner at home most nights, television in the evenings, small talk about neighbors and work. Occasional plans for the future that were never concrete enough to commit to. She talked about renovations. I nodded. I never scheduled contractors. Time has a way of smoothing over things if you let it, or at least making them feel permanent. 5 years passed, then 7. By that point, whatever she was doing had integrated itself into our life. Whatever I was doing had done the same. The confirmation, when it came, was almost boring. I wasn't looking for it. I didn't need it. But one afternoon, while organizing old documents, I found an email chain printed out and misfiled. Hotel reservations. A name I didn't recognize at first. Dates that lined up with those long errands and late nights. The tone was not romantic. It was logistical. Familiar. That was what struck me most. This wasn't a fling. This was an arrangement. I felt nothing in particular. No anger, no sadness, just a mild sense of completion. A box checked. I put the papers back where I found them. From that point on, my actions became more deliberate. Not aggressive, just final. I transferred assets. I updated beneficiaries. I reduced shared access. I stopped covering expenses that were not strictly necessary. I said nothing. She noticed changes but did not connect them to anything specific. She asked if everything was okay. I said yes. That was not a lie. Everything was proceeding as planned. When I eventually told her I was leaving, it was on an ordinary Tuesday. No context, no accusation, just a statement. I had already arranged everything. There was nothing to argue about. She cried. She asked why. I did not answer. I moved out within a week. There was no confrontation, no confession, no reckoning. Just an ending that felt administrative. Sometimes I think people expect stories like this to end with clarity or vindication. Mine did not. It ended with balance sheets and closed accounts. With routines dissolving quietly, I don't feel relieved. I don't feel cheated. I feel exactly as I felt throughout most of it. Observant, reserved, and aware that patience is not the same thing as forgiveness. I allowed it to continue because I wanted to see what it would become if left undisturbed. Now I know. That is enough. If you made it this far, you're a legend. Leave a like and subscribe so I know you're one of the real ones. Thank you.